My name is Kenya Daniels, and by the time I turned 30, I thought I knew what family meant. I grew up the daughter of Atlanta's most celebrated black developers. Their empire stretched across the city skyline, with our name etched into half the glass towers downtown. To the world, we were polished perfection. Inside our mansion, though, I was reminded daily that appearances came before love. The day I told my parents I was marrying Jamal, a man who ran his own plumbing business, they refused to attend. My mother's voice, cool and sharp, still echoes in my chest. Enjoy marrying beneath you. Don't expect us to stand in that embarrassment. They didn't know what was coming. A week later, I sent them a single photo that shifted everything. Phones rang non-stop, texts poured in, their panic suddenly urgent. But before I tell you what that photo revealed, you need to understand where this all began. Our family estate sat on 5 manicured acres in Cascade Heights, gated with wrought iron and lined with magnolias. To the neighbors, it was black excellence on display. But inside those walls, love was rationed, weighed, and compared. And somehow, I was always found lacking.
From my earliest memories, I knew I wasn't enough. My parents, Charles and Denise Daniels, expected perfection, but only when it came from my younger sister, Simone. Simone glided through life with the kind of effortless charm that made people forgive her flaws. If she stumbled, it was called endearing. If I stumbled, it was called disappointing. At dinner parties in our chandelier-lit dining room, my mother's smile was a weapon. Kenya, can't you carry yourself like Simone? Look how she engages with Judge Harris. That's how you build influence. I tried, Lord knows I tried. I studied harder, spoke softer, straightened my back until my spine ached. In 3rd grade, I brought home a report card of straight A's, placing it carefully on Daddy's mahogany desk. He didn't look up from his laptop. Good job, he muttered. 2 weeks later, Simone brought home C's. My parents whisked her out for ice cream, then bought her a new dress. Because she tried her best. By 16, the difference was a canyon. My birthday gift? $50 folded into a card. 3 months later, Simone got a brand new Lexus, parked in the driveway with a red bow bigger than her head. That was the first night I realized, love in my house was conditional. Kindly subscribe and turn on the post notification as we continue the story. By the time I left for college, I'd learned my place in the Daniels family, dependable but invisible. My scholarship to Howard University didn't impress them. You'll learn discipline, my father said, insisting I still take out loans, though his company had cleared over $100 million in profit that year. Meanwhile, Simone lived in New York City, fully funded by Daddy's credit cards. She partied in Soho lofts, flew to Miami on weekends, and posted pictures with celebrities. Her slip-ups were forgiven, her lifestyle celebrated. I, on the other hand, juggled work-study jobs and late-night library sessions, determined to earn everything on my own. I built myself out of sweat and ambition. When I graduated summa cum laude, my parents barely clapped at the ceremony before rushing off to some benefit gala. We already heard your speech at rehearsal, Daddy said, checking his watch. That was the moment I knew I'd never matter more to them than appearances. So I built my own world. A tiny apartment in Atlanta's West End, decorated with thrifted furniture and books stacked to the ceiling. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And for the first time, I felt free. Freedom, however, is fragile. On a rainy April Tuesday, my bathroom pipe burst. Water poured through the floor like a busted artery. I called the first emergency number I found, pacing barefoot in ankle-deep water, panic rising in my throat. 50 minutes later, a knock rattled my door. There he was, tall, broad-shouldered, skin the deep brown of roasted coffee, eyes steady and kind. A navy work shirt clung to his chest, red plumbing stitched in white thread above the pocket. His hands were strong but careful as he carried in a battered toolbox. "Evenin', ma'am," he said, with a half-smile that made my heart stutter despite the chaos. "Heard you got yourself a flood." That was how Jamal Red walked into my life. He worked fast, shutting off the main valve, cracking jokes as if we weren't standing in the middle of a disaster. He asked what I did, listened when I answered, even laughed when I admitted I spent more time with spreadsheets than people. 3 hours later, the pipe was fixed, but something else had broken open inside me. When Jamal handed me his card, his smile lingered. "Call me if you got any more plumbing emergencies. Or if you just want to finish that book talk." I knew then, this wasn't the last time I'd see him. Our first date was supposed to be simple, just coffee at a small cafe off Auburn Avenue. But what started as lattes turned into a 4-hour conversation that neither of us wanted to end. Jamal wasn't like the polished men I'd met at my parents' dinners. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was present, grounded, real. He asked about my work, not to brag about his own, but because he genuinely cared. When I mentioned my obsession with economic history, his eyes lit up. "You ever read Du Bois' Black Reconstruction? Changed the way I think about systems." I blinked, stunned. A plumber quoting Du Bois? Over the next months, our lives braided together in quiet, beautiful ways. We strolled through bookstores, argued playfully over which Harlem Renaissance poet was most underrated, cooked dinner in my tiny kitchen while jazz played low in the background. And every time his hand brushed mine, every time his laugh rolled through a room, the armor I'd carried since childhood cracked a little more. By the time Jamal kissed me under the glow of a street lamp, I knew I was falling in love. And I wasn't ready for how much my family would hate it. I thought introducing Jamal to my parents would show them what I saw, a man who was thoughtful, driven, and kind. Instead, it was a battlefield I didn't see coming. The moment I said plumber, my father's face stiffened, his smile hollow. My mother's eyebrows arched so high I thought they'd never come down. "How interesting," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "And how exactly did you two meet?" When I explained about the burst pipe, her glance at my father said everything. The rest of dinner was a cold performance. My parents gushed over Simone's latest fashion internship and her boyfriend, Gregory, whose father owned half of Buckhead. They ignored Jamal's polite questions, talked over him, treated him as if he were invisible. But Jamal never flinched. He smiled, nodded, carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who knew his worth. In the car afterward, I apologized until my throat hurt. He only squeezed my hand. "Kenya, you don't ever need to apologize for other folks' ignorance. Not even your parents." I didn't know whether to cry or kiss him. So I did both. The next morning, my mother called, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "Kenya, darling, we just want what's best for you." "But a plumber? Really? What kind of future can he offer you? What will people think?" I clenched the phone until my hand shook. "Mom, Jamal is intelligent, kind, and he runs his own business. He makes me happy. Isn't that what matters?" She sighed, long and dramatic. "You've always been stubborn." My father was less subtle when he called later. "This is a phase," he said flatly. "When you're serious about your future, we'll introduce you to someone more appropriate." Each family gathering after that became a theater of humiliation. My parents bragged about Simone's new boyfriend and his Ivy League degree. They looked through Jamal like he was transparent, dismissing his every word. Yet Jamal never lost his composure. He didn't shrink. He didn't grovel. He stood tall, confident, and entirely himself. And every time they tried to make him small, I loved him more. 6 months into our relationship, my family invited us to their beach house in Hilton Head. Against my better judgment, I agreed to bring Jamal. It was worse than I imagined. My mother accidentally set only 5 places at a 6-person table. My father launched into conversations about hedge funds and overseas investments, deliberately excluding Jamal. Simone and her boyfriend smirked as they discussed European vacations, throwing shade at Jamal's blue-collar charm. That night, I broke down on the beach, sobbing into Jamal's chest. "I don't know why they can't see how amazing you are." He kissed the top of my head, his voice low. "They see exactly what they want to see. That's got nothing to do with me." There was something in his tone, something secret. "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping tears. He only smiled. "When we're back in Atlanta, I'll show you something." I didn't know it then, but that secret would change everything. The following weekend, Jamal invited me to his apartment. It wasn't flashy, just a modest place in a quiet neighborhood, but it was immaculate, filled with shelves of books that stretched to the ceiling. As he cooked dinner, I wandered through his living room. On his desk, I found notebooks full of intricate diagrams and patent filings stamped with the U.S. seal. "Jamal, what is this?" I asked. He set down the wine bottle, his expression caught between pride and nerves. "They're designs. A smart water conservation system I've been building for the last 3 years." My heart raced. "You designed this?" He nodded. "MIT Engineering, class of 2011. I worked as a systems engineer for 6 years before I walked away." I froze. "MIT? Systems engineer? My Jamal? I thought you were a plumber," he finished with a grin. "I am. But I'm also more. I never stopped being an engineer. I just chose a different path." That was the night I realized Jamal wasn't just fixing pipes, he was rewriting futures. He handed me a folder. Inside were patent papers, investor emails, and a bold title, Aqualife Systems. "This," he explained, "cuts household water use by 60%. I've tested prototypes across Atlanta. It works. Now investors are circling." I stared at him, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice softened. "Because you fell in love with Jamal the plumber, not Jamal the MIT engineer or the startup founder." That meant everything to me. Tears welled in my eyes. Unlike my parents, I'd loved him for who he was, not what he could become. 2 weeks later, in a small botanical garden where we'd had one of our first dates, Jamal dropped to one knee. "Kenya, you saw me for me. No pretenses, no titles. Just me. Will you marry me?" The sapphire ring sparkled in his palm, but it was his words that made me cry. "Yes," I whispered, through tears. "Yes, I will." Little did I know, saying yes meant declaring war with my family. The day after our engagement, I called my parents, my heart pounding with both joy and dread. "Mom, Jamal proposed," I said, my voice trembling with happiness. And I said yes. Silence stretched so long I thought the line had dropped. Finally, she spoke. "That's quite a surprise. Have you really thought this through?" No congratulations. No joy. Just judgment. "Mom, I love him. That should be enough." "Well," she sighed, "you'll do what you want. But your father and I can't support this decision." Minutes later, she shifted the subject, gushing about Simone's engagement to Gregory. He had proposed the week before, with a 4-carat diamond, planning a lavish June wedding. I ended the call numb, the happiest news of my life shoved into the shadows of Simone's. But the truth cut even deeper. Their rejection wasn't just about Jamal. It was about me. The contrast was brutal. For Simone and Gregory, my parents threw an extravagant engagement party at the country club. 200 guests. Champagne fountains. A string quartet. Photographers ensuring their celebration was splashed across Atlanta's society pages. For Jamal and me? Nothing. Not even a family dinner. When I asked about it, my mother patted my hand. We thought you'd prefer something simple, given Jamal's situation. Translation: he's a plumber. You don't deserve the same celebration. The humiliation deepened when my father announced, over dinner one night, that he'd set aside $300,000 for Simone's wedding. Only the best for my little girl, he said, raising his glass. I sat frozen, remembering his response when I told him Jamal and I planned a small garden ceremony. Well, that sounds economical. I suppose it suits your circumstances. My rage burned, but Jamal only squeezed my hand under the table, reminding me that our love was worth more than their money. 2 weeks later, I called my parents one last time. The wedding is August 12th at Riverside Gardens. Ceremony starts at 4. I want you there. My father sighed. We have a gala that evening. You can come to both, I pushed. The gala doesn't start until 7. We'll see, he muttered. They never did. The day before the wedding, I called again. My mother's voice was cold. Kenya, your father has a meeting with investors. We cannot miss it. It's my wedding day, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. And it was your choice to marry him, she snapped. Enjoy your plumber. We won't be embarrassed with you. The line went dead. I sat in silence, my chest hollow. After all the years of chasing their approval, I finally understood they would never choose me over appearances. And now, I had to choose myself. The morning of my wedding dawned bright, as if the universe was mocking my grief. Riverside Gardens shimmered in sunlight, the air heavy with jasmine. My best friend, Tasha, laced up my simple ivory gown while I tried not to think about my parents' empty seats in the front row. You look radiant, she whispered. Are you okay? I forced a smile. I'm marrying the love of my life. That's all that matters. But when I glanced at my phone at 3:45 and saw no missed calls, no last-minute apologies, my heart cracked again. I dialed my mother, desperate. She answered coolly. Kenya, we've been through this. We have other commitments. But it's my wedding day, I pleaded. Her voice dripped with disdain. Enjoy marrying your plumber. We won't be embarrassed with you. The call ended. My tears fell. Then came a knock. Baby, you all right? Jamal's voice carried through the door. I broke tradition, letting him in. When he saw my tears, he knelt, holding my hands. Kenya, he said softly, this day isn't about them. It's about us. Do you still want to marry me? Through sobs, I whispered, yes. More than anything. The ceremony began with my Uncle Lawrence, my father's brother, offering his arm. Your daddy called me, he said quietly. Told me he wouldn't be here. I told him he was a fool. Then I asked if you'd let me walk you down the aisle. Tears filled my eyes. I'd be honored. As the music swelled, I stepped into the aisle, Uncle Lawrence steady beside me. Jamal's eyes found mine, filled with a love so fierce it silenced the ache of my parents' absence. Our vows were raw, unpolished, but truer than anything I'd ever spoken. Friends cheered, Jamal's family wept, and when he kissed me, I felt free. At the reception, the absence of my parents became a blessing. No icy stares. No sharp whispers. Only laughter, dancing, and warmth. Jamal's mother hugged me. He's never been happier than with you, baby. That's all a parent should want. Later that night, as we packed for our honeymoon, I sent one final message to my parents, a photo of Jamal with his MIT colleagues under a banner reading "Congratulations, Jamal Red, CEO of Aqualife Systems." The caption, "Thought you'd like to see what you missed." Then I turned off my phone. Our honeymoon was simple, just a cabin on Lake Oconee, but it was perfect. We swam, cooked, played cards by lantern light. For the first time in my life, I felt fully seen, fully chosen. On the third day, Jamal stepped onto the porch, his phone in hand, eyes alight. It's official. Vertex Capital just invested $5 million in Aqualife. We're going to full production. I leapt into his arms, laughing through tears. Baby, I'm so proud of you. That evening, the Atlanta Business Journal published an article, "MIT Engineer Secures Major Funding for Revolutionary Water System." When I finally turned my phone back on, it buzzed violently, 27 missed calls, 15 texts, all from my parents. Kenya, call us. We need to talk about Jamal. Why didn't you tell us? Please call immediately. Jamal glanced at my screen and raised an eyebrow. Interesting timing, huh? I nodded, emotions tangled between anger and pity. For years, I'd begged for their love. Now they wanted Jamal, for what he could give them. And I didn't know if I had forgiveness left. We returned home to find more messages waiting. Finally, I texted my mother, busy with work. We'll talk when I have time. Her reply was instant, dinner tonight. The harbor view at 7. It's important. Jamal smirked. That didn't take long. Instead, we invited them to our apartment. Home turf. At 7 sharp, they arrived, my father clutching champagne, my mother holding a gift bag, both dressed to perfection but jittery beneath their polish. My loves, my mother gushed, wrapping me in a hug that felt rehearsed. We felt terrible missing the wedding. I didn't open the gift. Would you like some tea? We sat in stiff silence until my father finally cleared his throat. Jamal, we owe you an apology. We made assumptions that were mistaken. And if we'd known about your MIT background, my mother added quickly, we would have. You would have treated him like a human being? I cut in, my voice shaking with fury. Their smiles faltered. Jamal sat back, calm as stone. I leaned forward, finally done with pretending. You're not sorry for how you treated him, I said coldly. You're only sorry you underestimated his net worth. My father shifted in his chair, falling back on the voice he used in boardrooms. Regardless of misunderstandings, we'd like to move forward positively. In fact, William's development could benefit from Aqualife Systems. Perhaps a partnership. Jamal interrupted, his tone calm but firm. Funny you mention that. We've already secured exclusive rights with the Riverfront District project. My father's face drained of color. That project was his white whale, a billion-dollar redevelopment he chased for years. He stammered, that's unexpected. My mother leaned in, her eyes darting. Well, maybe that's even more reason our families should work together. I slammed my palm against the table. Stop. This isn't about business. You didn't come here because you regret missing our wedding. You came because Jamal is suddenly worth something to you. The room went silent. You valued money and image over your own daughter's happiness, I said, my voice trembling. And now? You think you can buy your way back in? That ends tonight. For once, my parents had no response. The months that followed were a blur of growth and reckoning. Jamal's company thrived, Aqualife becoming a cornerstone of sustainable housing across the South. My career blossomed too. I was promoted to senior consultant, advising clients on green investments. Together, we bought a cozy brick home in Decatur, a place filled with laughter instead of judgment. My parents, meanwhile, spiraled. Gregory's fraud pulled Simone into a scandal, their company entangled in lawsuits. For the first time, my parents' empire shook. Their so-called friends disappeared, leaving them isolated. Late one night, Simone called, her voice cracked with tears. "Kenya. Bradley's gone. The FBI raided the house. I have nowhere to go." Despite everything, I said yes. She moved into her guest room, stripped of her designer labels, just a broken woman trying to rebuild. Living under our roof, Simone saw what love looked like when it wasn't tied to status. She whispered one night, "Y'all are actually happy, not Instagram happy. Real happy." I squeezed her hand. That's what happens when love is the foundation. For the first time, she seemed to believe me. A year later, my parents showed up at my door. They looked older, smaller, humbled by public disgrace. "We've been thinking," my father said, voice heavy. "About values. About family." My mother's eyes brimmed. We lost everything chasing appearances. But when Simone was at her lowest, you took her in. That's what family does. We were wrong. I studied their faces, searching for sincerity. "I can't promise things will ever go back to the way they were," I said slowly. "The old way wasn't healthy. But maybe we can try for something new." Jamal squeezed my hand. "If you want to rebuild, it won't be through business deals or gifts. It has to be real this time." They nodded. Years later, when Jamal and I announced we were expecting our first child, their joy was unguarded. No judgment. No conditions. Looking back, I realized the greatest gift my parents ever gave me was their rejection. Because it forced me to stop seeking their approval and start defining my own worth. And worth, I learned, has nothing to do with pedigree, or money, or image. Worth is choosing love every single time.